Hi, friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Mental Fitness Unscripted podcast, where our conversation will encourage your healthy living journey. Inspired by our Team Quadzilla coaching motto, healthy living starts between your ears, we talk about mental fitness in ways that challenge us to think about our thinking regarding topics like habits, leadership, exercise, values, marriage, parenting, and faith. Our hope with this podcast is to sharpen you as we sharpen ourselves to be all we were made to be. So let's dive right into the conversation on this episode of Mental Fitness Unscripted. All right, good morning. Hi, Dennis.
Good morning.
I'm so glad to have you here. Everybody, this is Dennis Rabb. He is a friend of mine, and I consider him a mentor. We met at church, and we seem to have a fair bit in common, and have just really enjoyed connecting and talking about all kinds of different stuff. And so a while back, I was like, man, you have so many great stories and wisdom to share. I hope you're writing this down because, eventually you're not going to be here anymore, and those kind of things might get lost. And so let me encourage you to capture those. And so I know that you do some writing and whatnot. And I thought, man, wouldn't this be a clever way to get at least a wee bit of something from my friend Dennis and have it recorded for all time? So anyway, I just want to have a conversation similar to what we do, at church, or, when we've taken a bike ride or something, and just, whatever kind of comes up. We had talked just a few moments ago about the idea of miracles, and how we believe that miracles are happening every day, and they're all around us if we're paying attention, and just kind of our experiences with that, and maybe what that looks like, and we'll see where it goes from there. So
Sounds good.
I don't know, initial idea or thought about just the concept.
Well, I appreciate your having me. And again, just before we went on to record, a couple thoughts came to my mind. I became a Christian around the age of 20, but there are a number of pivotal events that took place before that. Some I would consider miraculous, again, depending on your definition. I was a seeker, a searcher all through my growing up years. I wasn't brought up going to church or anything like that. But again, for the sake of time, a couple things, and this may go along with the idea of just stories of adventures, crazy things. Again, this is 50 some years ago. We just got out of high school. A friend of mine and myself decided we were just going to hitchhike up north. And this is kind of toward the end of the 60s, and the whole thing with John Kerouac and things like that on the road. And there were still people willing to pick up hitchhikers. And so we took off from the Detroit area. We went up north through the Upper Peninsula. My friend basically was planning on, we were both going to start college a few weeks after this. I was going to go to Wayne State in Detroit. He was actually going to go to Michigan Tech. So we kind of went through some of those areas in the Upper Peninsula, spent, I think, about 3 days hiking through the Porcupine Mountains, huge state park, largest state park in Michigan. We were on our way home, coming back through Wisconsin. The plan was to kind of go around the lake through Chicago somehow and then get back home. But we ended up.
This was all by hitchhiking?
This is all by hitchhiking. So
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I can't remember how many days this took. The first day I remember we spent the night at Albion College, where his girlfriend was attending. The only thing I remember about that was there were some crazy guys in a frat house that had baked some brownies that had apparently had some marijuana in them. So that was, I didn't have any of that, but well, not to say that I wouldn't have at the time, but that's a whole nother issue. But anyway, we were up, left Porcupine Mountains. This is like about middle of September. School started later for both of us. Both schools at the time were on quarters, and so they would have one quarter before Christmas. So essentially we didn't start till late September. Anyway, we ended up in a town kind of in northern Wisconsin. We camped out just north of there somewhere. We had a couple rides in the morning, and I remember very distinctly we were sitting kind of in the middle of Stevens Point. There was Stevens Point campus of the University of Wisconsin, sort of a, an outlet campus. And this guy that picked us up, kind of right there, you could actually, the college is right there, the administration, student center. I can still visualize it, kind of this, older type, something you picture like, Constitution Hall type building. He picked us up. Pretty soon we're driving along out in the country, probably going 65 miles an hour on this 2-lane road. He's an interesting guy because, and I don't remember his name at the time now, but he was a Vietnam vet who's going back to school on a GI Bill at the time. He had a family, a wife, and I think 2 children. We were in and again, you won't remember this, but it's called a Volkswagen Squareback. It was a little wagon, quite small. They didn't have seatbelts at the time. This was like 1972. The car was probably 4 or 5, 6 years old. I don't even think they put seatbelts in, and people weren't required to wear them at the time. But anyway, that's part of the story because we're probably 10 miles outside of town. He was, headed to this little town where he lived. I remember very distinctly coming up to this road crossing. We had the right of way. We were on kind of more the main road. There was this pickup truck, and I remember distinctly it was loaded right up to the top with scaffolding, and you could see it's kind of sticking up. For some reason, he must not have seen us because he started right out in front of us. And fortunately, he must have at the last minute just saw we were coming, pretty fast. Well, the fellow that was driving the car we were in slammed on the brakes. Obviously, there was no way we were going to miss. Now, fortunately, because the truck had started to turn away trying to avoid us, we didn't hit him head on or, side swipe him, T-bone him. We just kind of hit hard and then glanced off. Just before we hit, though, and the only thing I can say was it had to have been the voice of God. And I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't religious. I mean, I'd go to church periodically, but the voice was very distinct in my mind. It wasn't an audible voice, but it said to me, everything will be all right. And I know it was God. We hit the truck, glanced off, just missed a telephone pole, and all it seemed like we were just rolling almost like endlessly. I don't know how many times we rolled over. It was this huge irrigation ditch, probably 10, 12 feet deep at least, that we ended up in on our side, kind of on the driver's side, the car all banged up. And my friend who was in the front seat, I was in the back seat at the time, my friend ended up literally on the hood of this car. The windshield, fortunately, had just, flown out on impact. I felt like I'd gotten thrown around kind of like a rag doll, just shaking around. All that I had were a couple bruises. The driver, he had a couple facial cuts. And my friend, who was literally out on the hood of this car, he had a cut on his knee that needed a couple stitches, and that was pretty much it. Now, I can't explain that, just that the magnitude of that, but the voice was very distinct. Everything will be all right. Now, ironically, again, you begin to ask questions. When you're 18 years old, you don't think about death. But for the first time in my life, I was pretty much confronted with that being a possibility. Well, about 2 months after this, ironically, this case, we picked up a hitchhiker. I was with a couple of friends, and it was a Friday night, typical. We're just out. We weren't doing anything bad. We weren't drinking or doing anything crazy, just hanging out, driving around. And there's this guy hitchhiking. I grew up in a suburb of Detroit. So this actually where we picked him up was in Wyandotte, Michigan. It was dark. I can't remember, probably about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And he goes, he's hitchhiking there. And then he goes to pick up something. I figure, well, he's hiding a booze or something like that. Well, he gets in the car. There was a guy sitting next to me. He just moved over. And then this fella got in the car, and there were 2 of my friends in the back seat. Well, he gets in the car. He's got a .22 caliber pistol in his hand, and he's got a gun belt around his neck. It was almost surreal because I'm almost thinking this is like some cowboy movie or something.
Yeah.
He's got this gun belt around his neck with like bullets in it, basically, and this gun he's waving around. It was pretty obvious, in a matter of seconds that this guy was just high out of his head, just stoned, whatever. Not knowing what he's doing. And he'd actually taken a shot at a car because he had 2 or 3 empty cartridges in his hand. that he'd picked up, and he's just talking, and of course, this, he was really upset about something. I think it was a girlfriend issue. Her parents apparently didn't like him a whole lot, and you think, well, we wonder why.
Well, yeah, how could that be?
How could that be? I mean, figure this one out. So, we finally got him settled down, because he was just all over the place. So he told him, okay, we'll drive you to your girlfriend's house. That's what he wanted, which is actually probably 8 or 10 miles away. It was out in the country. He was cognizant enough to direct us there. So, got him to unload the gun. We're feeling a little bit safer. Okay, everything's going to be good. Get him there. And I said, okay, he told us his name. I think it was Fred. Anyway, so, I'll get out the car and walk you to the house. As we're getting out of the car, Fred starts loading up the gun again. And I mean, I would have probably, if I'd have seen that, I had time, I'd have probably tackled him or something before, because I'm thinking, oh no, what the heck if this girl's, parents answer, what is going to happen? Well, I'd already committed myself. He's got the gun loaded. He's got it in his hand again. He's got the gun belt around his neck. We go up the stairs to the porch, ring the doorbell, and my knees are literally just shaking. I don't know what's going to come down here. And door opens. It ends up that his girlfriend's home alone there. I stuck around for a few more minutes. She talked to him again, kind of settled him down. He got the gun unloaded and kind of left. And that was the end of that. There's kind of a little epilogue, though, to the story. A couple of friends that were with me that night actually ran into him at the mall, like about a week or two after this. And they recognized him immediately. And they said, hey, Fred, you remember us? Do you remember? He didn't remember a thing about that night. He was so out of it. They said, yeah, we picked you up and you're really upset. Didn't remember any of it. So again, 2 times in a matter of literally 2 or 3 months, I faced the possibility of dying. You begin to really ask, where would I go? Is there something after death? So that was really pretty pivotal in my, journey toward Jesus. Not that I accepted him right there, but it was probably about, maybe a year or so or 6 months after that I, confessed my faith in Jesus. So that was part of it. One of many things, actually.
Yeah.
A miracle, I don't know. I guess, yeah, I think so.
At the time, would you have regarded those incidents as miracle? I mean, after the dust settled in each event.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I had experienced supernatural experiences before that. I'm assuming some of them were from God, some of them were not. I said I was a seeker, and I sought truth and just experiential type things in all kinds of areas, including New Age, the occult. I didn't consider it that. Some of it was, just Bible reading. The Book of Revelation, the late great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey had come out around that time. And again, you may or may not remember that. The whole thing was, I made it really very. I mean, the book sold literally 10 million copies or something. It was on the New York Times bestseller, and it talked about the second coming of Christ and all these things that were supposedly happening from the Book of Revelation at the time. And so there was, a huge, in the church, this huge interest in end time things and, finding specifics in the Book of Revelation as they applied to the culture. This is the 1970s, early 1970s. And again, there have been several books since then. So anyway, there was an interest in that. So part of my searching was in the Bible, and including the Book of Revelation, Daniel, the prophecies, and how they maybe would apply to the current events of our time. Looking back now, a lot of that interest, and I think a lot of the interest in the occult, not only my own, but I think for many people, is just to have a supernatural or some kind of special power, some kind of special knowledge. There's a large bit of ego, I think, that is involved in that, and which can happen, even in religious circles and Christian circles as well. Well, I know more than you, and that I think was motivation. So actually, before coming to Jesus, I had experienced numerous things that I would consider supernatural. For example, just being in a room and the light would just suddenly turn on. And one of the times it's actually happened, I was home alone. I was on the phone with a girlfriend, my girlfriend at the time, and she was very much kind of like mind, and we were searching all kinds of things together against some Christian, some mostly occult type stuff. It was my sister had this light, and you actually needed to click the switch to turn it on. So you say, "Oh, it was just a short," or you could actually hear the switch click. The light came on, and there was a weird kind of presence. I'd opened myself up, I believe, to supernatural demonic forces just because of the things that I had been engaged in at the time, tarot cards, Ouija board type things. I had taken a class actually with my girlfriend in transcendental meditation, which that was kind of a big deal with the Beatles. And again, we're talking 50 years ago. They had, advertised it. It was something just sort of to relax, release stress. In reality, it's a religion. It's somehow associated with Hinduism, and definitely that was another opening, I think, for the enemy in my own life before I became a Christian. Actually, I did do that experience. They do you separately, you do it as an individual. So, and I never really even talked to my girlfriend a whole lot about it afterwards. And we broke up pretty shortly after that experience. It was the summer of my senior year, and that hitchhiking trip was just a little bit after that. But anyway, the experience was such that, you bring like fruit and some flowers. It's sort of as an offering. And I felt a little bit weird. It was uncomfortable. And the guy, the teacher, whoever, guru, whatever you call him, was kind of going through this liturgy. You might call it almost like what a church liturgy, but this was in Sanskrit. I didn't understand a word he was saying, and he's kind of babbling on in Sanskrit. Later, I read about that it actually is a worship service. There's a picture of this guy, the Guru Dev, who had originated transcendental meditation, and it's sort of a worship service to him. There's incense burning, and it's kind of got this religious aura about it. He started to, after the, going through the ceremony, starts speaking this mantra, which I'm supposed to just repeat. The purpose of this is you just empty your mind. It's no religious thing. There's no, doctrine attached to it. Again, reading on later, quite likely that mantra is the name of some Hindu god or goddess. So you're just basically entreating this god or goddess through your mantra that you continually repeat. You just repeat it, empty your mind. When I started to repeat the name of this mantra, or the name of this god or goddess, I felt something from outside of me come into me. It was very real. Again, you could say, well, that was just my imagination. No, it was very real. And it was a very euphoric. It was a good experience. It wasn't a bad or, like some evil, but it was good. And that was enough of a motivation to continue doing the meditation 20, 30 minutes a day. Never had another experience, but I think it was sort of the hook of the enemy. And I didn't put two and two together at the time. I'm meditating here 20, 30 minutes. And then I'm over here the rest of my life, which is pretty much chaotic. Confusion, anxiety, depression, not knowing who I am. But I didn't put two and two together. Okay, I could sit and meditate. But again, I think it was a subtle way in which the enemy had drawn me in through a positive, you might call religious experience. I would say it was supernatural. It was not just an emotional, not just a mental high. It was something literally I could feel come into me. Is the only way I can describe it, the sensation. And so that, I continued to doing that for, maybe a year or more, along with other things. But again, at the time I did start going to church. So there was all these conflicting, thoughts and ideas that I was going through. So again, I'm going on and on. I don't know if you have any thoughts or questions.
Well, it's just, I don't have experiences like that. So it's very foreign to me. And as such, a logical first response would be, that's crazy, or
Yep.
I don't get it, or I don't believe it, or whatever. But I believe you.
Yeah. And I appreciate that.
And so I also know that there's an unseen world operating around us all the time. and I don't know anything about it except that I believe that it is real. And you know, there's a lot of interest today, even
Tremendous
no
amount of
different
interest.
than
Yeah.
when you were young.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, it's gone in waves, and I think it's maybe even more so, or just as much as, you know, in the 60s and 70s when I was kind of a
Yeah.
teenager. You know, maybe it'd be appropriate to share, you know, and again, I'm pretty logical too, and I don't know why you know, I could share some stuff that would probably make you maybe think I'm crazy. I won't do that, but I will. I think I maybe mentioned this to you in church the other day. I've got the article here. Michael Shermer, and you said you don't know who he was. Some people might who are into, you know, maybe logic, or he's actually a professor. Um, is editor of the Skeptics magazine, a complete naturalist, doesn't believe in anything supernatural. From what I've read and from what I've heard, um, probably a quarter or more of atheists who come to Jesus do so through some supernatural encounter. Now, this is an encounter. This actually was written, and you can get the article. It's in Scientific America, very highly regarded scientific journal. And he has a little column he writes in there periodically. And in the article, he just, and again, I don't know why he decided to share this because it's pretty crazy, but he just talks about his wedding day and an experience he had. His wife that he married was coming, actually, she'd grown up in Germany and moved to the United States. She'd sent along a lot of her possessions, one of those being a transistor radio that was owned by her grandfather, who had died when she was 16 years old. He was probably the most significant male figure in her life, kind of like a father figure. And so Michael Shermer thought, well, I'm going to try to get, this is one of these old radios with the dials and, you know, from back in the 70s. He thought he was going to try to get this thing to work. It hadn't worked for years. Long story short, couldn't get it to work. You know, batteries, look for any bad solders, or, you know, he's a pretty intelligent guy. And he's trying to figure this. And this is with the real transistors. It's not like all this, you know, solid state. I mean, we're talking real transistors with wires, and he couldn't figure it out, threw it in the back of the drawer and forgot about it. The day of their wedding, the wedding takes place, and his wife says, you know, I think her name's Jennifer, you know, can we just have a moment? They go into the house just to talk, and, you know, because she's missing her family and just her home, and it's a special day. They hear this music playing, and they're wondering, what in the world, where's this coming from? They look all around for iPads or iPods. This is only like, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. This is fairly recent when he got married. Couldn't find it. Finally, could it be? She looks at him almost like with this hysterical look. Could it be? They go into the room, sit in the bedroom, open the drawer, and this radio's playing a love song. Now, again, remember, this is one of these dial radios, so probably 90% of the time or even more, it would just be between channels. You wouldn't catch nothing, but it just happens to be on this channel that's playing a love song. It just happens to start playing at the moment of their wedding for some inexplicable reason. His wife basically said, oh, grandfather's here with us. That was her explanation. I don't think it was that. Ironically, interestingly, the radio plays the rest of the day. They go to bed that night in their bedroom, plays classical music. Somehow, somewhere in the night, it just stopped playing. It never has played ever since. That was it.
You could never get it to work.
Never got it to work after that.
Oh my gosh.
And again, I think I'd mentioned to you, and it's interesting to read some of the, this is again in Scientific America, some of the responses. There's 30, 25, 30 responses of, you know, just people commenting. Almost all of them are trying to give some natural explanation for this. Oh, the wire must have just reconnected, or of course it was just, you know, why it happened at that time, they can't explain. But this idea, you know, the skeptic, the naturalist, Michael Shermer just writes it off as, I can't explain it, but I still don't believe in the supernatural or something beyond, you know, this realm, which is ironic and interesting. And well, what does it take for someone to believe that this stuff is real? You know, if we saw Jesus walking into the room, would we believe it? I don't know. Some people maybe would.
That's such a great indicator of the mindset of much of our culture, where they're like, and even in Jesus's day,
yes,
they were asking for another sign. Give us a miracle. Do something for us, and then we'll believe. and yet they always just want a little bit more. They need a little bit more evidence. They need a little bit more, miracle, something that they can't explain, and then it happens, and then they still don't believe. Well, that's
Yep.
simply because that's not the answer.
No.
That
And again, to seek
what they're
religious
looking
strength.
for, yeah, what they're looking for is not going to be found in some miracle.
No, I mean God can certainly use it, but I mean I've known people and have heard of stories of people who have experienced genuine miracles. I have a friend, I haven't seen her for a while, but she has an older brother, and I'm not sure if he's still living, but she told me this, and again, she grieves over this reality, and you can take this for what it is, but her brother had terrible asthma, and again, she's my age, maybe even a little older, so we're talking years ago, and it was difficult to treat this, like we're talking 60 years ago as a child. I mean, there were times he almost died. It was so severe. As a child, early teenager, they went to a healing service, and instantaneously he was healed of it. I mean, she said there were times he literally would have to get, in the summer when it was hot or humid, he'd have to get right by the vent of the air conditioner just so he could breathe. It was that, sometimes the asthma was so severe, instantly healed. And he walked with Jesus for, a number of years, but then he just kind of left the faith. So again, miracles in themselves don't necessarily, he can't deny, I don't think, he could deny that happened, that there's no explanation, and some natural explanation. Again, I don't know the man. Another story, and this is, I don't know if I shared this with you, but it's probably one of the most remarkable miraculous. And again, you can read about this. The lady's name is Barbara Snyder. Lee Strobel talks about her in a couple of his books, and you can actually look on YouTube and hear her testimony. And 2 or 3 doctors that treated this woman, Barbara Snyder, corroborate this in medical journals, but she was literally dying in her 20s of multiple sclerosis. She'd had pneumonia, and they would revive her and get her back. At this point, they just had said, there's no point. She's suffering so much. They just sent her home to hospice to die. She's basically curled up, her muscles and hands and feet are all atrophied. But a word went out on, I think it was Moody Radio, to just pray for Barbara. And people did, hundreds of people. Well, she's lying there, ready to die, essentially. And she hears a voice, a bold, loud voice, "Rise up, my daughter, and walk."
What?
Yeah, she's blind. She's atrophied. She's basically sitting there, going to die in a few days. She gets up. Now, again, she hasn't walked for weeks and weeks, months. Her toes are straight. She noticed that she can see. And again, her muscles are all atrophied. She can't possibly, have the strength. She gets up on her own strength, walks in. Her parents were in the other room, and that night this is in Moody or at Wheaton, Illinois. They went to a Wesleyan church. She literally walks into the church that night. It was a Pentecost Sunday or Pentecost service, and she literally walks into the church that night. People thought they were seeing a ghost.
Yeah,
She passed away a few years ago, but I think she lived into her late 70s, married a pastor, just lived a very fruitful, never had any reoccurrence of the MS, never had any repercussions. Again, anybody wants to, they can get on YouTube, look up the name Barbara Snyder. You can look up the medical journals, in which her doctors just said, well, there's no explanation. It's not possible. Yeah. Again, that's pretty remarkable. But.
Wow. All right, Dennis, we got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
And I just want to, for anybody who would listen to this and formulate their own ideas about miracles, or maybe have their own stories, I want us to think about kind of the punchline here. What do we want people to know about miracles? And I have a couple of ideas myself, but I want to hear from you first. For all of your experience and the different things that you have studied and have happened to you or people close to you, what do you make of the whole idea?
I guess the one thing I would say is, and again, there is a supernatural realm, and there are forces of good and evil. There's a God, Jesus, who came, lived, died, rose again. There are also, and again, I'm not going to claim to be an expert or understand all of this. There are obviously forces of evil. No one's going to deny that there's evil in this world. Question is, how do we explain that evil? And again, that's a difficult question. How can there, this has been posed for years. How can there be a good God and yet there still be evil? We could have a whole nother couple sessions on that question.
Sure.
Again, I'm not saying I've got the answer to that, but it does boil down to trusting the one who died for us, loves us beyond measure, and trusting that he's got our good in mind. Now, whether you experience or I experience a miracle is not the point. And again, if we do chase after miracles, I think there's a danger in that. Anything we experience in this realm has to be on his terms. He's God, I'm not. And I think it's that simple. And there's a danger, I think, if we try to seek God on our own terms, we can't do that. We have to trust, just simply trust that he does love us, that everything is by grace. Grace is not easy, though. Sometimes we think his grace is just, this namby-pamby cream puff God. No, he wants us to come to him on his terms, and that means a humble submission. So whatever we experience, even in those cases, it has to be done in that mindset, I think.
Yeah. To add to that, I think if somebody would be like, yes, I've had some of these experiences, or I'm going through some stuff right now, and things are happening around me that I can't really understand or explain. I would just say very simply that this could very well be God trying to get your attention.
Absolutely.
And if you're seeking for answers through the miracle, to your point, I would say just step back from that, and then just go right to the source.
Absolutely.
Focus your questions and your seeking into God's word, the Bible, where he has left us all kinds of information about himself and who he is and how he operates and how he would like us to be. And so that's kind of my 2 cents on the idea.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think sometimes in the church, people operating in the gifts of the Spirit and the power of God, we can get haughty about that and think we deserve or somehow we've earned. No, and let me make it very clear. None of these things I was deserve or particularly seeking. And I could share several other experiences where God has spoken or worked in my life. It's completely unmerited. It has nothing to do with me. And maybe the reason he's allowed this in my life is because it's sort of like, doubting Thomas. Maybe I wouldn't have been able to believe as easily if I had not experienced some of these things, where others, maybe like yourself or others, blessed are those who have not seen these things and yet believe. And that's good too. So maybe better.
Man. Dennis, this is fascinating. We're just about out of time here, but I just want to thank you for sharing some of your stories and really getting us to think about some of our own experience maybe, and wondering if, maybe this thing is the Lord trying to get our attention, or he's protecting us and we should be praising him for that, or all kinds of different stuff. There is no coincidence or accident in my worldview. So I just am encouraged to hear your story, and I hope that we can do this again real soon.
Absolutely.
And talk further about such things. This is great.
God bless you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right, Dennis. Have a great day. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Bye.